When I was very young, there was a small local amusement park near us that hosted a yearly event called Pumpkin Land. It always took place on the Saturday before Halloween. Kids would get candy between rides, and pumpkins were spread around the park for families to grab and bring home before leaving. I loved it every year, and one year in particular stands out when I was 7 years old. We went straight there after my soccer game. The park also gave rewards to kids who showed up in costumes, so I was dressed in a very typical Scream costume. My parents brought my 2 siblings and me to the park. As soon as we arrived, my brothers begged to go on the haunted house ride first, followed by the roller coasters. They wanted to knock out the scariest rides right away. My mom and my 2 brothers got into one of the haunted house cars. Since the cars only held 4 people, my dad stayed behind with me so we could ride together. While we were waiting in line, I suddenly got nervous and realized I needed to use the bathroom. We stepped out of line, and my dad walked me over to the restroom. He went in as well, but I finished first and waited outside. I stood there for a bit, starting to feel confused. After a while, I went back into the bathroom to check, but my dad was not there anymore. That was when I started to panic. I was alone in a massive crowd of people, and at 7 years old, the idea of being lost terrified me. Eventually, a man approached me and asked where my parents were. I told him I could not find my dad and asked if he could help me. He took my hand and said we were going to look for him. I remember how tightly he held my hand as he pulled out an old Nokia brick phone and started talking to someone on the other end. The main thing I remember him saying was, "Oh, I am with him right now," as he looked down at me and smiled. Then he said okay and ended the call. He told me that was my dad and that he was waiting near the parking lot. He continued guiding me toward the front of the park, but even at that age, something felt wrong. I knew my dad did not own a cell phone, and there was no way this stranger knew who my dad was. I was also wearing a mask, so how could he even know who I was? As we got closer to the front gate, I spotted a female park employee and started saying "excuse me" repeatedly until she noticed me. I told her I did not know the man and that I needed help. The man tried to defend himself, saying he knew my dad and was just bringing me to him. The employee believed me and asked me to stand next to her while she used the loudspeaker to locate my parents. The man left immediately after that. He quickly walked off toward the parking lot. The employee announced over the park speakers that a child in a Scream costume was separated from his parents and said my name. Not long after, my dad came running toward us, waving his arms. He was completely shaken. When the employee explained what had happened and mentioned the possible attempted kidnapping, my dad became furious. When my mom joined us, she was just as upset. My parents asked the park manager if they could review surveillance footage. Somehow, the manager said the park did not have any cameras at the time. Even so, my parents thanked the employee for stepping in and protecting me, and we tried to continue the day as normally as possible. I was too young back then to fully understand how serious that situation was. Looking back on it now as an adult makes it far more disturbing to think about. When my mom and stepdad left for their honeymoon, they did not trust me to look after the house by myself for the week, so they sent me to stay at my Uncle Ronnie's farm instead. He lives there with my Aunt Susie and my cousin Ronnie Jr. They have an extra bedroom upstairs where I stayed. The house is an old wooden farmhouse with a very traditional feel to it, but it is large and well kept. The guest room looked out over the cornfields and the several scarecrows my uncle had placed throughout the crops. This was a few years ago in the middle of October, and my uncle was in the middle of harvesting his corn. He asked Junior and me to help him out. Surprisingly, it was not boring work at all. I actually kind of enjoyed it. He was not using his combine that day, so we were picking a lot of the corn by hand. I had a small rolling basket that I was supposed to fill as we went. I kept noticing the 3 scarecrows he had set up. It looked like he had put real effort into making them. They were dressed in sweatpants, different flannel shirts, and straw hats pulled down over their heads. When we finished for the day, I asked Uncle Ronnie how long it took him to make them. He said it only took a few hours, and that they worked pretty well to keep birds away. That night after dinner, Junior and I played video games and smoked a little weed, and I went back to the guest room to mess around on my laptop. At some point, something hit the window. It sounded like a rock. It scared me immediately, because there was no way it was an accident. I did not want to look out the window, so I closed my laptop so the room would be completely dark and hoped it would not happen again. Then a second rock hit the glass, and my heart felt like it dropped out of my chest. I stayed still in the darkness for a bit before slowly getting up and peeking out the window. The moon was full, and one of the outdoor lights was on, lighting up part of the field and one of the scarecrows. I scanned the area, and when I noticed movement in the corner of my eye, I focused on the scarecrow and saw one of its arms slowly waving at me. I told myself that could not be real. After a moment, the arm dropped back down to its side. I slammed the blind shut and felt like I was going to throw up. I ran to Junior's room and opened the door, but he was already asleep. I shut his door and checked downstairs for my aunt and uncle, but all the lights were off. I checked their bedroom and saw they were asleep too. I went back to my room and lifted the blind just enough to look outside again. The outdoor light was now off, but the moonlight was bright enough to see that the scarecrow was back on its post. I stared out the window for over a minute, waiting for it to move again. The longer nothing happened, the more I convinced myself I must have been higher than I thought. I finally dropped the blind and went to bed. The next morning, Aunt Susie was downstairs making pancakes. My uncle was already outside working. She called Junior down to eat, and right then my uncle burst into the house yelling, "Where did the damn scarecrows go?" My stomach dropped. We all went outside with him, and he showed us that all 3 scarecrows were gone from the field. That was when I told him what I had seen the night before. At first I thought I imagined it, but now it made sense. The realization hit me hard that someone really did throw rocks at my window, saw me looking out, and had been pretending to be a scarecrow. Later that night, while everyone was asleep, the doorbell started ringing over and over around 1 or 2 in the morning. I heard my uncle and Junior yelling and running down the stairs, so I followed them. When my uncle opened the front door, all 3 scarecrows were standing on the porch, covered in red paint meant to look like blood. My uncle turned all the outdoor lights and called the police. Both the police and my uncle brushed it off as a stupid early Halloween prank by some immature kids. What still unsettles me is the chance that it was not a prank at all, and that something far more malicious could have been behind it. It was November, when the leaves had turned bright shades of yellow and orange. That has always been my favorite time of year to be out in the countryside. I was staying with my girlfriend at her dad's house upstate, which was usually only used during the summer. The 2 of us decided to go camping in the nearby woods while we were there. The house already had all the camping gear we needed, including a tent, so we parked there and carried everything into the forest. We did it mostly for the experience of sleeping outdoors. I had only been camping a handful of times before, but I liked doing it in the fall since there were fewer bugs and the scenery was unbeatable. We set up camp in a small circular clearing that was just large enough for our tent and a campfire. We sat by the fire for about an hour, eating and talking, then eventually crawled into the tent. We kept the fire going because it made my girlfriend feel safer, and it also helped keep us warm. After a while, beyond the crackling of the fire, we started hearing leaves crunching somewhere in the distance. My girlfriend and I exchanged a look, and she put a finger to her lips. I could tell she was nervous. Fires usually scare animals away, so as the sound got closer, it felt more concerning. The footsteps also sounded like they were made by 2 legs, not 4. The crunching grew louder until it stopped near the fire. Then we noticed the shadow of someone standing outside the tent. A moment later, the shadow shifted as if the person had sat down on one of the chairs by the fire. They did not say anything. After a few seconds, I decided to peek out and see what was going on. I stuck my head out of the tent, fully expecting to see someone sitting there. Instead, the chairs were empty. I stood up and scanned the campsite, looking into the dark trees surrounding us, but I did not see anyone. Inside the tent, my girlfriend was whispering urgently, trying to get my attention. I crawled back in, and she told me to look at the tent wall. There, clear as day, was the shadow of someone still sitting in the chair by the fire. That made no sense. I crawled back out again to check, and once more both chairs were empty. I went back inside and told my girlfriend what I saw. She did not ask any questions. She grabbed my hand, stood up, and followed me out of the tent. The moment she saw the empty chairs, she screamed. I told her to be quiet and pulled her along as we ran through the darkness toward the mobile home. As we ran, we heard a deep groaning sound not far from us, followed by a loud crash, like a branch snapping. We both yelled in panic and ran even faster. We found our way back by pressing the car lock button over and over until we heard the horn. Once inside the mobile home, we locked the door and hid under the blankets in the bedroom. Even then, I did not feel completely safe, knowing we were surrounded by woods. I stayed awake listening while my girlfriend slept. At one point, I thought I heard a clicking noise near the front door, but it could have just been my nerves. Eventually, I fell asleep. In the morning, we went back to grab the tent and supplies, completely terrified the entire time. Nothing had been disturbed except one of the chairs. It was knocked over. We grabbed everything, ran back to the car, drove home, and never went camping again.